Welcome to Medicine with the Metals. I'm Mark, and this is Michelle. Join us on our psychedelic journeys. Michelle, how are you today?
I'm good. I'm excited to be back. We were out for a couple of
We
weeks.
sure were.
We had some family things going on and some scheduling issues. So I'm happy to be back.
Yeah, I think today we're going to talk about ourselves.
We are. Today's going to be a
Definitely.
different kind of show. We're going to share some of our own personal stories to show you that, we can be vulnerable too.
Absolutely. And we have some really good things going on in the plant medicine community. We have the Shava. The Shava's getting ready to come out and launch. Talk about a little bit what the Shava is, why don't we, Michelle?
Yeah, so that is our directory. It's a community that's called the Shava, where our directory is going to be, where you can find any kind of plant medicines, anything associated with it, right? Holistic, you can find it there. Then there's going to be the community where you can network and find other people.
And then the plant medicine path, all the courses and educations that are coming up, and we'll be throwing out a landing page for that really soon.
Today's show is a little bit different. Usually we have a guest who we talk about their psychedelic experience or their offerings. And today, Mark and I are going to talk about ourselves and what brought us to this space, what kind of childhood traumas brought us to the plant medicines, and how we walk this path together as a couple, because it's not easy all the time.
Because life's not easy. But I guess psychedelics has really showed us a way. What I guess my path started back in my 50s. I guess, really, I never did psychedelics before. I had one experience, and I think I shared that once before. But, my first experience really with ayahuasca or any psychedelic was ayahuasca back in September of 2021. I think right around September 11th, that weekend of. And, you know, I think I came, I don't think I know I came to these medicines because I was like, just like most of us are, I was just kind of broken and stuck. I was really, probably turning about the age of 50 in that 40-year-old age. And, just still in that motion of just being stuck and being depressed. And,
Well, let's go back earlier, though.
sure,
Let's talk about our childhoods. So you tell
sure.
yours first. What was your childhood like, and what started your childhood traumas? Because I believe that it all comes back to
Well,
childhood
I didn't know about my childhood traumas until my adulthood. So,
hmm
because I think we kind of hold our childhood traumas back. So, I, I think my
Or
first
maybe we don't understand them,
Sure. Well, I mean, when you're a child, you don't understand it because all you need as a child is coddled and loved. So when you don't get that as a child, I think you don't know what that is. But I think my first really experience with any kind of trauma was probably in going into seventh and eighth grade when I was extremely bullied. I mean,
hmm
besides that, I didn't really experience too much trauma until now I think about it. So that was my first real deep dive into trauma, and it was really intense bullying for about a good solid year. And that's what I think. That's what I thought my trauma was. But
Sure.
as we all know, and we dive into this path a little more further, and we which we understand it. That was just the beginning. I think, right?
So what was your family like growing up?
I pretty much thought it was like the everyday family. My mom and dad we had a really deep family. We were always connected. We were always
Mhm.
going there, going places together. And, but come to think about it, if you think about it now, I would say my father was a really workaholic.
Mhm.
And I think that kind of where I get a lot of what I do from. And I think also my mother was tended to kind of, now that I look back, I don't know if she was so involved as I thought she was, but it, I don't see. I couldn't understand the trauma back then. I didn't understand what any of that trauma was. I knew one thing for sure is my grandmother was my life, and I
Mhm.
think I tell you that all the time. It's like I think because I was always there, and I think that's where I went to. So she kind of raised me, my grandmother. I think so. That's kind of odd too, right? But I don't know what's odd and what's not nowadays. But she showed me the most love, so that's where I gravitated to. And I think after my my life, I forgot about a lot of my childhood as I got older. I think in my teens, I didn't even today. I don't know. Like I don't really know when I was 5, 6, 7, those feelings and stuff. But I do know a couple things. I mean, I don't know if everybody doesn't remember their childhood or not, because sometimes you say that, like my childhood this, my childhood that. I don't remember a lot of my childhood. I don't know what that's from.
Hmm. Suppression.
Suppression.
Mhm. Well, but what were your mom and dad like? How did they allow you to handle issues as they came up in your life? I mean, what was the strategy? Was it just shut up, be quiet, be seen, not heard? Was it an abusive relationship? What was
I
it
really
like?
don't. To ask me that question, I really can't remember. I think I was really coddled, like, or really, I was never like, consequences were not in my future, and they weren't in
Mhm,
my then. There was no consequences for Mark. So I think that was a big lesson that I should have been learned. I think consequences are part of growing up. And when you're not taught the consequences, you grow up like the lifestyle I had. So you try to get away with everything, and, you know, you become that what you've never been taught. So you just keep doing and doing and doing. Because I never suffered consequences. I was always kind of saved by, if it was my grandmother or if it was my mother. Mostly the father figures in my life were, shut up. Da, da. But I was always like, I was the spoiled one, even out of all the grandkids. I was the spoiled out of everyone. And I don't know, my childhood seemed pretty good until I realized it wasn't, as we all dig in a little deeper.
hmm, yeah.
So
Well, sorry, I'll just take a break for a minute.
yeah,
Okay.
you could ask me questions.
You can ask me too.
Yeah.
I mean, how open you were willing to get.
Oh, yeah, open. Like, today's an open discussion day of trauma. So
When did you realize that they weren't treating you the way that you should be treated?
probably in my teens.
And how did they treat you? How did they treat you?
I would say I was really like, my mother always protected me, and my father was always one of discipline, and I was kind of like split in the middle there. So, um, but as I got older, I think they didn't understand how to treat me because I think when I we had a lot, we moved a lot when we were younger. When I was younger, so my dad was like worked a lot, so we moved to a lot of different places. So I think that was a little bit of an instability for myself. And I think moving to all these places, there was never any grounded structure. But every time we came back, we always came back to Chicago where my grandmother was. And, I mostly always gravitated towards her. But then getting older, I kind of realized I was really rebellious because of, I think, all the protection. I think my mother, because I don't think my mother knew how to be a mother. I
Mhm,
don't think she really knew. I don't think she really I think, as I know now, look back, and I think that she tried the best she could. But when I was at a young age of, like, I think 4 or 5 years old, I was already put on, what was it? For ADHD. I was already like classified for ADHD, and they put me on Ritalin. So Ritalin was already in my system at a young age. So
mhm,
I think when they're I think when the parenting stopped right there, because I may have been a hyperactive kid as a younger child, and I don't think they put me on medicine. And then when I got older, instead of, I think, showing me the love and support, I was always thrown in a drug rehab or put here, put there. I was thrown in a drug rehab for cannabis. I mean, back in the 80s. So I guess if you look at it back then, and in that way, I don't think they really, and I don't want to say this in a bad way, they didn't know how to parent because they just didn't know how to parent.
mhm.
Was I an out of control kid? I don't know. Was I missing the love that I was seeking from them? Probably, but I was getting that from my grandmother. So, a lot of things were happening there, you know?
Can I ask a question really quick?
Sure.
Do you think your parents were doing what modern day people are doing today with pharmaceuticals, just looking for that quick fix?
I think, of course, because when I was younger, I definitely know that, because I was always told by everybody, you're hyper, 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 hyper. So I was classified with like ADHD. But I also remember like being on those medicines and how they made me calm. Um, but do I think we do that nowadays? I think we try to find a quick fix to everything. So I don't think there's no quick fix to be a parent, you know? I
I
think it
don't, and
takes
I think that, you usually, hopefully, when you know better, you do better,
yeah,
right? And I think
yeah,
there's a lot of things to this day that your parents don't know better.
yeah,
They are very old school in the
yeah,
way that of their thinking,
mhm,
and, at the end of the day, they're very mean to you.
mm, yeah,
Your mom is very narcissistic,
yeah,
and it's painful as your wife to watch.
yeah. I could understand that could be. And I think she does it to a lot of people. And I think, I was turning into that way. And I think that's really why I escaped that way, you know?
Sometimes I think that the fact that you got to ayahuasca is such a fucking miracle, because when you're that deeply ingrained in that
Culture.
heavy
Yeah.
narcissism,
Hmm.
I don't even know how to say this right. When somebody gets their hands in you from the time you're born, right? And narcissism is about manipulation. It's amazing to me that you got to
Like you had a
ayahuasca.
narcissist on one side, and then you had the father on the other side that you can never make happy. So you had combating two different levels, you know? So I think seeing all that, and I think you're right, going into these medicines, I think was it really, it really was a
Well,
strong will
because
to get here.
what happened? I mean, then you got married, right, at a young
Hmm.
age, and you
Hmm.
had two kids,
Yeah.
and you were doing the same thing that your parents were
Oh,
doing to
absolutely.
you, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Can you
I
talk
sure
about
did.
that a little bit?
Well, because parenting, because of how I was parented, um, I wasn't really a good parent. I mean, I was not a good. I thought I was as a father, but I was so indulged with everything else. Like I turned into a workaholic. I turned into that parent that, I was never satisfied with how my kids operated, or I was just always, I wasn't that loving care. I thought I was this loving, caring guy, but I was more of that yelling, that narcissist, that person that I didn't want to be because of that. But I didn't even know that back then. I didn't even know that's the reason I was, because you don't know. So you think
Mm-mm.
you're this great parent, but looking back, it wasn't. I wasn't a good parent at all.
It's so
I
hard to
just
break
learned.
those it's so
Yeah,
hard to break those chains. I mean, you're
yeah,
raised a certain way, and then you
for
spend your
sure.
whole life saying, "I'm never gonna do this. I'm never gonna do this," and then you do the
Yeah,
exact same thing.
yeah,
We all
because
do.
yeah, and then when you're there, and then I'm in a terrible marriage. I mean, for 15 years, and we tried. It was terrible. It was just
Mhm.
terrible for my kids. It was terrible for me. It was just terrible. It was just fighting all the time. There was no love. There was no affection. There was zero. So, that probably portrays a little bit of how my family was. They think it's love. They think it's affection, but I think that comes from a different place. It doesn't come from, your mind. I mean, there our families, our cultures are really brainwashed to think that this is the way it needs to be. Even today, even as much change as I've gone through this process, it's still ingrained that these are bad things. These aren't the right way to do it. But it's kind of crazy to think that way because we've come a long way. Especially, I know I have. So, and coming to these medicines, like dealing with all this trauma, I now like I can understand that it was way way before the bullying. It was so deeper than that. And it takes time to realize that. And you can't hate these people. You can't hate anybody, but you can set your boundaries and you can set your limits, and you can set what is, I guess, what's hurting you. I mean, because I don't think anybody intentionally means, especially family, they don't intentionally mean to hurt you, but they're broken too. I mean, granted, definitely, my grandfather on my father's side was a very abusive man. There's no doubt,
Mhm.
and but I can't get it on my mother's side. I don't understand it. It's baffling.
Well, I mean, we don't know what her trauma is, right? I mean, I look at your mom, and she is just walking trauma,
Yeah, it's like
walking trauma.
I would say one thing about my family, and it's not a. I would say how I grew up. Our nervous systems are just they were on fire. I mean, they were just boom on fire. And even after, the whole medicines, my still nervous system was still whacked out. But it took a long time to get that nervous system where it needed to be. And I think
Were
that
you
was
in
the
a
most,
constant like fight or flight?
yeah, because that's how they keep you. That's how at least my family kept me, constant like I had to react, so I had to be aware, or I had to have an answer to a question before the question was even asked. It's
Mm.
really that kind of
S-
situation.
Well,
So,
Sounds like a form of control.
oh, it's
oh
very
my
controlled
God,
family.
Brian, the
Yeah.
most control you can't even
Hmm.
imagine.
It's
And
very mafia kind of like,
I do. I call
yeah.
I call them the mafia medals. It's very controlling, and
Mhm.
that
And I
is
think,
just your mom's
I
trauma.
think I think they understand. I think they feel that this is good. This is how family should be. This is what it should all be like. They don't because that's how they but it's so deeper than that, you know. I mean,
Max, let me ask
narcissism,
you a
sure.
question real quick.
Mhm.
Do you think that this has something to do with your privilege? I mean, you mentioned that you grew up in a wealthy family. Do you think
Mhm.
that that's maybe part of it? That's something that's always been in your family?
No, because my father grew up very broke, poor. Both my parents grew up very broke, poor. So they built a really my father built a really successful business. And my father was a very caring man. I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, like he would take money, monetary is very important to them. So, you know, he would take care of his employees very monetarily. But even when I worked for my father, I was kind of like always the kid that was be on the bottom when I could do so much better. It was just never
But you say he's so nice to everybody, but he wasn't nice to you,
no. And it's
and
still
he
not
still
really not.
isn't nice to you.
No, no. No, I don't think no, they're I don't think and I think that's the kind of they still think that's love. They think that's love. And I don't, to me, it's not love. And I think he knows that I've kind of really set my boundaries there. I think as much as I really can. Um, but I inherited all these things. You inherit these from all these traumas and
Mhm.
because I was a narcissist. I was both of those. I was a narcissist and an empath at the same time. I mean, I was just both of these, and I was really a battle. I was really fucked up. I mean, I could not understand any emotion. All my emotions were just whacked before I came to these medicines. And that's because of that. That's because I never understood them. But once I started understanding and working through these medicines the first few times and understanding what emotions are, those, I think everybody has a different viewpoint of parenting and love and what they do. And, mine was totally different, even me raising my kids was totally different. Even to this day, my relationships struggle with one of my children because of all these things. Because he's stuck in that cycle still. He's stuck. He doesn't know any better. But I think all these things just take time, and they take time, and a lot of things take. I think forgiveness comes into play, but you have to also forgive in a manner where you don't hurt yourself. You have to set boundaries when you forgive. You
Mhm.
can't just say, "Oh, I forgive you. Everything's great," because I tend to do that. What I really have a really accomplished, I think, through this process, and I'm really proud of this. That I think I do this really well. Is you know, good or bad, I kind of forgive. How do I say it? I think I forgive really quickly. I think if somebody, I tend to forget things really quickly. Okay, this happens. Let's just move on. I kind of look for more of a solution to it than sit in that. And that's one thing that I think these medicines has really taught me because I can't change them. I can't. And if I sit and if I sit with that all the time and with what they do and this and that, I just can't change them. I just have to live my life. You know,
That's right. You can't change them. You can only
yeah,
react. You can only change your reaction to them.
yeah, true. And my reaction used to be a lot. I mean, my reaction's been evolved so much. I kind of just, I don't. I don't let them see a reaction. So that's the best thing for them, is just not to let them see a reaction, because they love a reaction.
Mm.
So no reaction's the best. And that just solidifies a lot. When your parents say you've changed so much, is that good or is that bad? I don't know. I mean, are they telling me that's good or bad? So
It just depends on what day it is.
yeah.
I mean, sometimes they'll say you've changed in a very kind and loving way, and
hmm
sometimes they'll say you've changed, you're crazy and
hmm
you need to go to church and talk to a minister.
Yeah.
Mm.
And that's
But
actually
that's
something they said.
yeah, that's definitely their upbringing. This is
Mhm.
definitely and I can't change that. I can only change me to hopefully change what my kids see, to hopefully mend relationships for the future. I just can't change this, because at the end of the day, one day, I mean, they're not going to be here and life's going to go on. So I have to keep moving. If like my sister's a different story. She stays stuck on this, and she's really stuck in this. So it's really her um nervous system is just haywire. And but that's what she wants. So we can't, she
The
knows.
thing is though is she doesn't know any differently.
Yeah.
So this is my perspective, and I just married into this family a year and a half ago, and my family's very fucked up. Like, so
hmm
there's no judgment here at all. But my the way I see it is that you guys don't even notice the abuse,
hmm
and it is abuse because you're so
Mm.
used to it.
Yeah,
Mm.
You guys don't even notice it.
definitely.
It's crazy. And I'm sitting here like, holy shit. Like, is this really happening? Like, these are
Yeah.
grown-ups. These are her grown ass children.
And then add alcohol to the mix.
And then
Mm.
add 3 or 4 glasses of wine and
hmm
we're in a shit show.
hmm And that's daily. That's a typical day of the life. But they know that, and they're not going to change that. So
No.
you know that's how they think it's supposed to be. And when you think that way and you think what you do is always the best way and nobody else's way is good, that's what is that anyway? That's being you're just being controlled by the whole system, because it's what it is. I mean, they know no better. They think
Mm.
this way. They can't even opt to a change. They can't even
They
opt to
cannot
think.
hear it.
They
They
cannot
they
hear.
literally cannot hear it. They're
No.
so asleep.
Yes.
Are you
And
the
I-
oldest, Mark?
Yes, for sure. Yeah. My
So
sister
you,
and
you
me.
got to learn first.
Yeah, I got to learn first, for sure. Yeah, I definitely. And I think that's another thing too. I got to learn first, and being to learn first, people, my other siblings and cousins, and because we had a really tight family. I mean, when people were like, my grandparents were like like when we had families, it was like these were every weekend. It was gatherings at his house. I mean, this wasn't like, we were pretty close knit. And kind of when that happened, when they passed, everything fell to shit. But another funny thing about that is, how my mom and my parents want to be family, but they always took us away. Like, they took me away from my grandmother. They took me away from that. But they talk how everything was supposed to be together and family now. See, family to me is, it's not about the quality of time. It's not about the quantity of time. It's about the quality of time. So you could spend hours and hours with people and say, oh, I spent time with the family. And every minute you're like, God, I can't wait to fucking leave. But, if you're there and you're enjoying yourself, it's for 20 minutes. It's just that quality, it's like, but their belief is all this time. It's just their belief systems is not, they don't align with who I ever was. Like,
It
I was
just
really brought into religion and church. Like church is like, this is it. Church is it. Like, and I really, really despise church. Even at a younger age, it was the most yuck thing to me to do. And there was something about it. It was like, this isn't real. This is just bullshit. I knew then it wasn't real, and I was really young. I just knew this whole religion stuff was just a farce. And it just, to me, it was just silly. When people used to throw the dollars, I used to say, what are they doing? What are these people giving to
Yeah.
Go do something
Well,
else.
because your parents, I don't mean just your parents, a lot of people, but will go to church, right? And then leave church, go have a
Mhm.
couple glasses of wine and
Yeah.
start calling their son a fucking asshole,
Yeah.
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 right?
It's
Yeah,
just
that's
it,
nice.
it's just how, church was really a negative aspect of my life. But now that as I grown older, I really think, the Bible is a really important book. I think the Bible really tells you about a dude. And it's about a guy that really kind of he's a badass, and he kind of only what had just a few friends, but he tried to share share a fucking message.
Hmm.
So the Bible is a pretty good book, and it's just, but the Bible, I think, when it's taught in the religious aspect, I feel it's not a cool book because you're being told. But if the story itself is really pretty ingenious,
Mhm.
so
I think what we
I,
don't understand as young children is that it can be interpreted in many different ways by
mhm,
adults.
right,
Definitely.
yeah, and I mean,
And
whatever
we
it
take,
is,
and as children, we take it as fact, because everything
sure,
that is told to us, we believe because they're
sure,
older and they know more. But
sure,
the
yeah,
Quran can be, taken just as terribly.
exactly,
I found
but
great comfort in religion growing up.
hmm,
Great comfort. God was my friend for sure.
hmm,
And I look different. I look at it differently now, but
hmm,
I think for me, marrying into this family and bringing my own shit, right? It's challenging because
mhm,
I have all of my own childhood traumas that get stirred up, right? So even things that I thought that I had healed get stirred up, and it's difficult. It's very difficult.
yeah, it is. It's trying. I think that's why a lot of people leave families, like separate, like drive miles away. Because I think this happens more often than not. So,
Mhm.
and I think when you lose, I think you nailed it, Brian. I think it's all about control, even control at this ages of your life. You know,
Hmm.
it's always that sense of control. Because they lost control of me, and I have Michelle. My sister lost control of my mother's lost control of my sister. She has Mike. My sister's been married 4 times. I mean, that
Yeah.
has to tell you something. But
Yeah, I mean,
it's
like
just,
for me, I'm the youngest of four, so four total kids, and the oldest one, it's like the firstborn learns from their parents, the secondborn learns from their parents and their sibling, and it just cascades down. So it's like I didn't have just two parents; I had like five
Mhm.
mm,
when I was growing up. So it can definitely, I feel the trauma can definitely cascade and move different ways, like water flows through different streams in a river. I, I'm high.
I love that you're high.
I
It's
love
the
that.
truth. I mean,
That
that's
was
exactly what I
great
said. It was really
because
good.
everything's about the river. The river always flows, and you got to keep flowing.
Well,
You
and
know,
you
I,
either flow with the river or you're going upstream and you're
yeah,
fighting against it.
yeah.
And
But
I've been
one
fighting
thing,
against it my whole life.
yeah, right. But I think one thing at the end of the day is you have to set boundaries. You just have to set boundaries on this path. And
Absolutely.
I think it's really taught me that boundaries are important, and they're the toughest things to do. Even I haven't set them fully 100%. I try every day more and more. And
Yes.
I'll tell you one thing: you can't hate the people that they are. You just
Right.
can't hate them. You just kind of gotta almost be sad for them because it says like watching children. It's very much like watching children sometimes, and we leave, because we just don't. I don't need that, I just leave because I just don't need that kind of energy. Once it starts
Well, and,
affecting,
and and it brings up so much. So I come from a very, very abusive childhood and family. And my my mother was 14 when she got pregnant with my sister, 15 when she had her, and it was my grandfather's child. And there's the violence just goes back. It's just such a violent story. And then the day that my sister was born, um, my grandfather died. So he died. Well, he died 2 days before she was born. And then when my mom was at his funeral at age 15, she went into labor. And and then I was born, like 10 months later. And so it was a real hush hush. Nobody talked about that kind of stuff. I mean, people barely talk about it to this day, but back then in the early 70s, you do not talk about
Yeah.
that sort of thing at all. And she was a very violent woman, very violent. She almost, she went to prison for almost killing me.
Mm.
She went to prison for attempted murder of somebody else. I mean, she was a very violent woman. And my father was a very violent man with his words, not with his actions, but with his words. And he was a very, very successful man as well. So I sort of had these very polar opposites of life. But it was extremely traumatic. And I left home at age 13, and I have not been home since. And it turned me into a very independent person. I've been in fight or flight, really my whole life. And so when I had my children and got married and had my children, I swore my whole life I was never going to be like that woman, right? I'm going to do everything I can not to be like that woman. And then I started finding myself doing some of the same crazy shit she was, right? Like she was a full on alcoholic and drug addict. And when my youngest was 2, I found myself starting to drink more and more. And I decided right at that point, I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to put my children through what my parents put me through. So I went to recovery, and I never had a drink since. And that was 24 years ago. But the patterns still follow, and it's so hard to break that lineage, and it's so hard to break it. All the women in my family have been teenage mothers, every single one of them except
Mm.
me, both my sisters. Now both of their children have been teenage mothers. I mean, these are so hard to break, these things.
Yep.
So then my mom died, and when she died, it was a very difficult day because she had packed up her whole house and was actually going to come live with me in Wyoming. And I had been sober for quite a while at that point, and it was the first time in our life that we had sort of reconnected, and I was going to bring her to live with me and help her on this road to sobriety. I don't know what in the hell I was thinking.
Mm.
And so she packed up her whole house, and instead of coming to my house, she hung herself. And
Ooh.
I never got to say anything to her. I never got to tell her to fuck off. I never got to tell her I loved her. I never got nothing. She was just gone. And it was really at that point that I started looking at plant medicines and going to that, because I knew that there had to be more. And while I had believed in God my whole life, and he had been there and he had been with me
Mm.
during all the abuse and the fucked up shit that I went through, I later understood God differently. I understand that I am God, you are God, and all of that. But it helped. And the plant medicines, I knew there had to be something deeper. And the first time I went and did ayahuasca, she took me through my grandfather's life, who he died before I was born, and he was never spoken about. We were not allowed to speak this man's name. And Mother Ayahuasca showed me all of his pain. And then she showed me all of my mother's pain. And then I understood. And instead of all of this hate that I had for her for not being this woman that I needed her to be, I had all this love and empathy and understanding. And that was 5 years ago. And we've had the best relationship ever since.
Wow.
So I thought these things were healed, right? I thought I'd healed them. And then all of a sudden I was in front of your mother. And she was just as abusive as my mother, but with her words.
Yeah.
And it has stirred up all this shit inside of me that has been really hard for me to deal with. And I haven't known how to set those boundaries.
Yeah.
So it's real life shit. I mean, here we are walking this path together, doing psychedelics, trying to be on this mission together and do these things and build this thing that we're trying to build. And we're still struggling
real life
with real
stuff.
life shit.
And it's all boils down to trauma. I mean, look at trauma. Look at the magnitudes of trauma. Look at yours. Yours is huge. I mean, if people would say, "Oh my God," and then look at mine, they'd say, "Look what he went through." All that just word stuff. But
No,
it's
words are
just.
much worse than
But what I'm saying is,
physical.
look at trauma is just traumas, and traumas are just
It's
what
all
why
relative.
it's all relative, and
Exactly.
it's really where it's really I think where plant medicines really come into play because they really go to the root of your traumas. And for me, there's nothing that nothing that could have done what this has done for me. And I don't think I look at Michelle, nothing. I mean, so many people. I mean, there's this, there's something that happens through these experiences that really rewire and refire, and they kind of just they help you navigate things better, and you see things just so much more clear.
They help you understand,
Yeah,
and they help you understand the trauma that was put upon you, and it happened for you and not to
yeah,
you. Things happened for me and not to me. My very first memory in life, I was probably 2. So we were living in this apartment, and my mom used to watch Donahue. Only old people remember him, but we would watch Donahue, and I remember my father walking up these stairs, and she had a frying pan in her hand, like one of those old time skillets. Fucking whacked him over the head with it, and I was probably 2 or 3, and I remember it. I remember it so vividly, and then I remember anything else, right, until I was like 10. So it's what these medicines do is they bring to the surface, allow you to see, understand it, forgive it, and then it just becomes part of your story, and you're not attached to the
yeah.
feelings.
The attachment away from that, because I think when you're going through this. I mean, I used to cry every second because I think that's so like when you're crying like that. Like I watch some of these psychedelic stories, and it brings me back. Like when you're like because I don't think those feelings have ever been felt, and I think that's when you really start getting these emotions. And I think when you are crying during your integration times, when you go through those, you talk about things a lot easier now than I could hardly get 10 words out before. But it's just because of that process that I think they're still broken. And once you be able to talk through these things, you become less broken, and it becomes easier and easier to talk about. Because when you're all like in that, you're just like you're all rattled, and you don't even know your emotions. You're just like crying. That was my emotion because I have two emotions. I have um anger and sadness, and those are common. They just work together.
Well, I mean, sadness is anger. We
Yeah.
just
So
sit with
those
it
are
long
really
enough.
they just different forms. And when sadness comes up, I just get angry. That's that's what I see. That's my thing that I have to work on here is that part. Because I mean, you peel these layers, and like I think me and Michelle say this all the time. We're never healed. We're always, I mean, kind of doing something. We don't
I
kind
mean,
of stay
healing is
stuck.
linear.
Yeah.
It's always going to be happening.
So we always kind of are working on ourselves.
Healing is just like change. It's always it's inevitable and always
Yeah.
happening.
Yeah, always happening. If you're like, I'm perfect, and that's my parents, I am perfect the way I am. I'll never change. And if you're stuck in that way that you will never change, what's the purpose? Why are you continuing to go on? I mean, because change is inevitable, like you say, and you have to do it to keep evolving. If we didn't change what we were doing every day in the business, if we didn't change what we're doing every day in our routine, it just becomes routine and there's nothing new to it. So change is fun, kind of. Change is
So,
really cool.
so Mark, do you think that maybe the reason why your parents make comments about you changing is because they realize that you're changing in a way that they can no longer control you?
Of course, there's no doubt about that. And that's been for a while too. That's been for a long while.
But they
Because nobody,
forget, they
you know,
forget, and so then
yeah,
they
I
think
have
it's
to
they blame
remind
it on
them.
me, right? Well, this is coincidental that Michelle just happened to come into the picture at the same time.
Yeah,
What are you
but,
doing to our son?
yeah.
Mm.
But
It's
I have
always
to
the new wife.
yeah. But I have to remind them. I remind them. I remind them just of my boundaries. I mean, there's just been a lot of things that have really come to the surface in the last 4 years of my family. And
Mm.
I know that's the root of all my problems. There's nothing, I always thought, oh, it was the bullying. It was this, that was a huge fucked up part of my life, but shit, shit happened so much before there. So I think that's what we all go through, and we all bury that. And when we unbury it, especially on this path, you become you become who you don't want them. Who do you don't want to be? You don't want to be this unless you do want to be this. You know, like we'll look at some of Michelle's friends and some of my friends, Michelle's friends mostly, and their people are doing the same thing. I mean, if you look at the pictures, everything's just so staged. And the next one, it's the next generation. It's this,
They're doing
they're
the
doing the
same thing
same
that
thing,
they
same thing next gen. It's like, dude, let's do something different. I don't
let's
know.
do
It's
some
just
that's what we're doing.
programming's deep in this world. It's really
Oh
deep.
my God, it is so deep. It is
Mhm.
so deep.
I think we're missing two things. We're missing love because you know, when it when it boils down to it, that's what it all is about. Because that's what we're all searching for. I mean,
Love and faith.
faith, yeah. Faith in what though? We're gonna have faith in something, so we have to have faith in ourselves. So
Yep.
because you can't have faith in somebody else because they're not going to bring you anywhere.
Right.
We can think we have faith in them. We can think Taylor Swift, we have faith in her. We can look up to these people who we always look up to because their word is, but at the end of the day, it's your word. And
But
it's,
isn't that the most freeing thing when you come to realize nobody's coming to save you? You're here to save yourself. And when I
Yeah.
first started to understand that, it was terrifying. Like, what? I mean, no one's come to
because
save
you
me.
didn't have the tools because it was terrifying because you didn't have the tools. And one thing about this path that Brandon always used to say, Brandon Picard, who's a really good friend of ours, is every you always pick up a new tool. You pick up a new tool and you put it in your basket. And I think in the beginning, we don't have no fuck tools. We had a rock. We just throw the rock. And now I have a bunch of fucking tools. But I just think that comes with the time, and that just comes with learning, and that comes with what, not blaming others on why I am the way I am, because I have to blame myself. You can blame.
I hate that word.
Yeah, I mean,
It's not blame.
you can say it was others, but at the end of the day, you're the only one that can change you. So that's what I mean by that.
And I think, something else that's good for us to touch on is as a couple walking through this, right? I mean, it's not easy. I mean, Mark's trauma response is anger or sadness, he says, and yelling, right? And my trauma response is to run. And I'm a really good runner. I'm really good at running.
She does a 12-minute mile.
Shut up. But that's my fight or flight. I've had to have that, right? I
Right.
mean, I had to literally run for my life from the one person who
Mhm.
was here to protect me. So
Mm.
my fight or flight is deep, and it I think I was even explaining this to Shane the other day. I mean, I almost used it as a weapon my whole life, right? I don't need anybody. I can do this world by myself. I do not need anybody. I don't need a man to help me raise my kids. I raise them by myself. I've never had anyone give me money. I've done everything by myself, right? And I use that as a weapon, and I used it a weapon against Mark during the
Mhm.
first 6 months. Like, I'll just go. Like, I'm so independent. I don't need you. I don't need this. Like, I'll just go.
Mm.
And I started to realize that really was a trauma response. And once I started, I've worked really hard on that.
She's done great. And I go after the jugular. I mean, there ain't no doubt about it. There ain't no in between for me. Once you piss me off,
0 to 60 in 4 seconds.
I'll just go right after it. I don't care what it is. And that I've worked on immensely over the last few years. But, I still have that reaction sometimes where it doesn't, I'm going to go after your deepest rooted pain that's going to piss you off, that you're going to just go internally. Everything goes off me now. So I'm really good at that. And I try to use that now in better ways. There's good ways to use that too, instead of that way.
I mean, there's all these beautiful things that we do together as a couple, right? And we're on this path of healing 24/7. I mean, Mark and I do this 24/7. So like, there's great tools that we can use together, but we can also it can be difficult because we're always trying to fix each other, right? Like, you need to heal this, or you need to go do medicine, or you need to, and there's no you need nothing. I need to take care of myself, stay in my lane, and you need to take care of yourself and stay in your lane. But that's what happens when you start walking down this path, is you're like, well, I see this and I can see that. And
But
we're mirrors.
one thing I think we both do is I think we both go inside. I, d- I don't think either. I mean, at least I know I try. I don't try to deflect anything. I don't ever think I look at Michelle and say, you did this to me. Because she can't. I mean,
Mhm.
if I'm pissed off, it's because of me. I mean, but I think that's what we do really good. And maybe I do it a little better than Michelle because I think, I don't know, I have that other thing inside me that I forget things real quickly. So,
Not me.
but I can just, I have a really good way of turning that off and going inside and saying, okay, that was me. Fuck it. I did it. Who cares?
And it's like that in every relationship. You don't have to be down this path, right? You just have to
Yeah.
understand people's nuances. And, I'm one where, if I'm in a fight with someone or there's confrontation, I'd like to take 24 hours. I was taught that in AA by a sponsor for 25 years. That you
And I
take
want to
24
resolve it
hours.
right there because it needs to be resolved
Mm.
right now.
there. Right. And so while I'll be like, let's just walk away and come back to this, that doesn't happen. But we're learning how to do this together. And at the end of the day, we found this great love that neither of us ever expected. And it, it's been amazing. It's been this amazing, beautiful ride. And we've only been married, well, it'll be 2 years in May.
Mhm.
And I'll tell you this too, that the person that I was prior to plant medicines, because I am different now. I'm the same person, but everything's different. I would not have even probably spoken to you, right? I
Mhm.
mean, you're in Florida, you're a Republican, you love Donald Trump, like all these things that I used to think were these big things. Like he comes from this big Trump family, and I'd be like, God, I could never, blah, blah, blah. And now I understand and look at all of it differently. So
Mhm.
while it can be challenging that we do these medicines together and walk this path together, because it's almost like we can use it against each other, it's the most beautiful part of my life.
Mhm.
Mm.
We
Doing
realize
this with
Trump is
you.
just a person, just like Biden's a person, just like
I
they're
totally,
just
totally,
people,
totally,
and
totally,
whatever
totally.
they are,
I'm
they
not.
are.
I totally, totally,
But
totally. I don't
it's so
believe in any
silly,
one way or the other. Everybody's
and
just
it's just it is. We've come. We do a lot of like work, like almost every day. It's kind of obnoxious, but I think it really helps. And I think,
Well, you're right, because sometimes we're like, "Fuck it, can't we just not like talk about medicine or
yeah,
healing or work or I'm doing
yeah,
this or spiritual
let's go
this
get
or
drunk, but we don't drink.
no, we don't do that." But we're walking this path together. We're
Yeah,
figuring it
but
out. And I
yeah,
remember Branton Picard, again, who we did have on here, and he said, because Mark and I started this when we were just friends, but it really didn't explode um, until we realized this deep love for one another. And he was right. And we create out of love, and we've created this beautiful thing together.
absolutely. We are done. I think we've done pretty amazing.
Yeah, I think so too. I'm
What
proud
do
of
you think,
you.
Shayna?
I am so impressed with you too. This is such a beautiful episode, and the real and the rawness that you're sharing your stories, and you're sharing that you're not perfect. And the more I talk to people, the more I think that if you haven't had childhood trauma, and you're saying you don't, you're lying.
Or you haven't
Because
found it yet?
yeah, I think
Yeah.
we've all had it,
Yeah.
and it's just something that happens.
And we're
But
not taught it. We're
yeah.
not taught it in school. We're taught useless things. We need to be taught differently. We need to be taught how to align our seven chakras,
Well,
who
see, I
we don't
think
talk
that
about. We need to talk about that our main gut is actually 80% of our thought processes are in our gut. We're not taught any of this. We're not taught that mental health is everything, your physical, everything. We're
it's
taught
not
that,
physical. We're taught to be quiet. We're taught to
yeah.
keep it in and
Mhm.
and be quiet. And if these aren't talked about, I mean, let's talk about my sister for 1 minute, right? My older sister, she's only, I mean, we're 11 months apart. I want you to think about just the trauma that she was born with, right? Before she even took her first breath, think about the trauma that she was born with. And she'll never watch this because she just won't. But, you know, she is so traumatized to this day that she couldn't even begin to have a conversation about what happened to her. In my family, well, we don't really, we don't talk about any of this anymore to this day. And this shit happened 50 years ago.
Mhm.
So it's deep, and families don't talk about it. Families don't talk about these things, and it all boils down to childhood trauma. I believe that even if it's something that happened to you when you were 7, something happened to you at 7, and then you were raped at 30, your reaction and how you deal with that rape is going to come from that childhood trauma. Do you know what I mean? If you don't heal those things, it's sitting in there, it's festering. So then when something happens, you're dealing with it differently than you would have had you dealt with that hurt in the first place.
And these medicines work. I mean, at the end of the day, there's a lot of theories out there. There's a ton of science, and we all know that we're into a culture right now that people are looking to change something. I mean, especially looking at the younger generation, and even our older generations, really, looking for something different. And
Well, the younger generation
this
is.
is this is this is this is life changing. I mean, if you really want to jump in and change your life and change your path, this is a really, I mean, there's other ways to do it. Plant medicine, anything to get out of your consciousness and to understand who you're not, right?
Absolutely. I mean, when I first learned about these medicines through my children's father, he found them first. And my hope when I first started understanding ayahuasca was that if my kids went and did ayahuasca before they had their children, right, then the lineage, it's starting to break before their children were even born. And that was my hope. And my children have done these medicines, all 3 of them. And there's still pain and hurt and unhealed
Yeah, there's
trauma.
not a quick fix
There's
because you have to
not.
do something with it. You can't just, like, you have to do something in life. You can't just do something and say, we do a microdosing, and everybody says, well, it's been 4 days, it's not working. Um, Everybody expects instant gratification. Me and you have been on this path for what, 5 years? I I'm still I still have issues daily.
Of course.
There's nothing. This is the world we live in. It just becomes easier to navigate with more clarity, and you become more aware of love. And that's what I think the
Hmm.
bottom line is.
Hmm.
It's not about nothing else but that at the end of the day. Because even as a child, that's what you're looking for. I mean, if your childhood trauma is because of you're missing something, what you're missing is love.
But it
So
all comes down to self-love.
self-love.
It
Yeah.
all comes down to self-love, because once you
Mhm.
have that self-love, real self-love, and people say, I love myself. I love myself. But when you
Yeah.
find true self-love, then you start letting go of those things that don't serve you any longer and
Yeah.
only allowing the highest vibration of love into your life. You don't allow this low vibrational bullshit
And
anymore.
and I'll say something. It's not a lot of people will come and do this. They just won't because so many people are stuck. They're just stuck. They're okay. They're fine. They're just living. So we just here to try to get this unstuck, people that really are just trying to navigate to a better way because a lot of people still think this is all crazy. But, taking a pill every day that's, label warnings on it that you could die is crazy too. So what's not crazy? I'm not dead. She's not dead. Thousands we know aren't dead. These medicines work. And
Yeah, I think the most important thing is to get out there to other people is that they have options, not
Yep.
that's it.
just one way that doctors say this is how you're supposed to do things.
Yep.
We're trying to educate people on there are other options out there that are more natural and have been around longer that we know more about.
We know way more about
Way
too
more.
because we're learning from the processes, but we are reinventing them.
And
Why
what
don't we keep them the
happens
same?
is these medicines are show you truth, base truth. And
Yeah.
once you see that truth and once you understand that truth, it's hard not to see it. You
Yeah.
can't not see it. And the majority of that truth for myself has been all about me. It doesn't have anything to do with my abusive mother or my abusive grandfather or my asshole father or it all has to do with me.
Yep.
Every fucking bit of it has to do with me. Every bit of it.
Yep.
And your energy has to go somewhere. And I think
Yep.
For
the
sure.
medicine really helps you process and channel that energy into something positive.
For sure. And you have to understand this. Let's say, like, I'll just use maps for an example. Okay, you have a product that works. Okay, just we use psilocybin. Why are we taking psilocybin? We know it works already in its natural form. So why are we taking psilocybin and adding these chemical compounds to it to do something different that it's really not supposed to do? But what's the purpose behind doing this? We know iboga works. Why are we taking iboga? And I know taking the compound for ibogaine, I know the reasoning behind that. But why are we doing these to these chemical compounds that are already here and they already work in their natural form? Why are we creating them to be a chemical form? We know the answer why.
Yeah, of course, because we're
What
humans.
there's no rhyme or reason to any of this. It doesn't make sense at the end of the day, because we could take the psilocybin as it is, but let's take the psilocybin, let's put it in this form, let's add some molecules to it, let's market it through the FDA, and let's make a lot of money on it. That's the end game. That's the end game. And all you have to see, the end game is always about money. It's never about Michelle's health
But
or
it's
your
not our
health.
end game.
It's not. It's not our end. This has nothing to do with us at all. This has to. So people need to be more aware of that or awake to that. There's a lot of awake people out there right now that see beyond a lot of this shit. And this is what psychedelics have done for me. I used to be that. It's like that was it. Like, this, and 401k, this, and I got to do this and work this. No, I mean, we're creating with none of that. We don't live in that world, and we're creating
We
more.
don't.
We're creating more beautifully. We're creating more out of abundance. And I seen a very interesting thing on Fox News the other day about this very successful businessmen, how now they're operating all their businesses out of love now, because how the old ways don't work anymore. They just don't. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
And I think we had a great show today.
I do too. I enjoy talking about this. It's just real. And a lot of times people say, and everybody says this, right? You put up like your Facebook life is not real. This isn't
Yeah.
real. Everyone like puts up the good stuff and da.
Yeah.
Well, I put up the bad stuff too, but a couple months ago, I threw a pumpkin at your head, and I apologized for it on Facebook. We're human.
Not a real
I did.
one.
I threw a pumpkin at his head. He really pissed me off. And that wasn't okay, right? That was like a total Pam thing to do. Pam was my mom. It wasn't a real pumpkin, but so, and it was funny, and now it's funny. But the point is that we are not living perfect lives here, and this is constant work. And when I had somebody the other day say, "What is the work? What is the work?" Always saying, "What's the work?" I'll tell you what the work is for me. The work is the other day when we were in the midst of a full drawn out battle, right? The work for me is to sit in that and not get in the car and run away. And that's my work, right? Or the work is for you not to get angry and sit in that. And I mean, the work is real life, everyday shit, doing things that are uncomfortable and doing them anyway. That's the work.
I hold to that. What a great show today, Michelle. I like talking about us.
I do too. I think that it's important to get out there that, we're just real
We're
people.
human.
Just walking through the trenches
We
and
ain't
trying to
perfect.
figure this out.
I'm not perfect. I know that. I say it every day.
That's right. But we're trying, and we put the work in every day. And, something I can say about this man is that you do more work than anyone I've ever met. And it's not easy. And you look deep and you look inward, and you're just a beautiful human being.
Thank you. You're my rock.
All right. I think we have a psychedelic story. We love these.
We do.
Okay, so my name is Amanda Moore, and this is my psychedelic story. I'm going to try and keep this concise. I will go into my childhood trauma, which began while I was in my mother's womb. She was abused sexually by my father, and she was also abused by her father. My grandmother was abused by my grandfather, and my father had his own story that I never actually did get to find out. So I was sexually abused by my father from in vitro, as I have now discovered, up until the age of 17. And I only knew this form of love. I had no reference point at all because I had no brothers or sisters. I was sent to Catholic girls' schools and kept very isolated from other children. And along with that, I was also molested by a priest at the Catholic school, and my grooming, of course, had made that perfectly acceptable for me. So having this trauma and going up into the age of 17, not realizing there was anything actually wrong with the experiences I was having until the age of 15, when I heard some girls at school with their laughter and their giggles going into their own stories of experiences that they had had with boys, which is all quite natural. And I remember standing in the lunch hall when they actually were telling these stories, and I was listening with open ears as they had turned to tears, realizing that I had had those experiences with my father, and my world came crashing down to the point of I left school and came home and was a completely different person, because I now had to carry everything that had just landed within me, and the guilt and the shame and the non-understanding of why or how. As you may know, and many of us do know, the blueprints that are created for us in our younger years become how we regulate our emotions and feelings and how we show up in our adult life. So the actual abuse ended at 17 when I believed my mother, who already knew about it. She actually left me there every weekend, and it was only within her capacity to do that. It was very affluent upbringing that I had, a very good distraction from what was going on, and she just could not have really at that time ever chosen to take and save me, so to speak, anywhere else because of her own conditioning. Day later, he actually left when I was 17. There was a big argument and he went to work abroad for about 9 months. Unraveling that story and just bringing it forward, they left and came to Australia when I was 23, because I was now a time bomb waiting to go off. I had taken myself on my own journey to see doctors. I had bulimia and anorexia, swinging between the two, trying to create a way of controlling the turmoil within me, which led to more disgust and more shame. So I went on my own path, and I think they only knew that maybe that there was some point I was actually going to let the cat out of the bag, so to speak. So they left for Australia, which, funny enough, is where I live now, but they were completely different paths that were taken. Moving forward, I went through 35 years on antidepressants and drugs, talk therapy, you name it, every modality. I went on spiritual quests to India and sat on mountaintops and meditated for hours, all looking at ways to find myself or find some peace within myself, which there was none of. I struggled with connection socially, and particularly sexually, relationships with men, picking very different versions of my father, intermittently playing out different roles of being dominant and being submissive, because they were the ways that I could control what it was I was receiving, but still became very, very damaging to myself. I was only inflicting more pain on myself internally. So the quest for peace led me through all these different journeys and pathways, which are actually all quite beautiful now I understand the whole picture of the story. But I still found myself empty. And it was when I was 50, my father died from lung cancer when I was 30, which led to a breakdown and suicide attempts with drugs and alcohol. The drugs that they gave me were the ones that nearly killed me more than once. So he died and I had a breakdown. Then my mother ended up coming to live with me. She had dementia and could no longer look after herself. And even though I had really struggled to confront my mother with my story, I did. And she didn't believe me, and she spat venom at me and disowned me and wouldn't speak to me. And it took probably 2 years for her to come round and actually apologize and say, I'm sorry, I let him actually get to you. And there was a kind of recognition and a healing between us. However, taking that journey forward, the dementia erased that memory for her. So she only remembered how loving and adorable my father was and how much she loved him and how much he loved me. She would keep telling me, which was something that I just couldn't sit with. So eventually she passed, and that was just before I actually found psilocybin mushrooms. And she died in my arms, and it was a beautiful passing. I was burst into hers, and she died in mine. And that was the beginning and the end of one story and the beginning of another. So moving more so into the how I came across the psychedelics was I watched the movie Fantastic Fungi and listened to a talk by a scientist who is now actually my partner, funnily enough, or not, no coincidences. And I began the journey with psilocybin, and it allowed me to go and visit versions of myself and my trauma in a very safely held space. That during the processes of me using these in the journey process as well as microdosing, I had more awareness around my behaviors, my thought patterns, what was actually mine and what wasn't, the whole ancestral lineage that had created this pattern of severe abuse, and it goes way back into the 1400s through my family tree. So there was an awful lot. And having my own daughter now, who's a very beautiful little oracle, who gifted herself to me, and I'm forever grateful for that. It was down to me to be the cycle changer. So I wasn't just doing this for me. I wasn't going to allow her to carry, even though she wasn't in an area that was anyway threatening abusively. I wasn't going to let her carry any of this story, even though we know genetically we carry the DNA of our ancestors. I've actually been through processes where I have cleared my DNA, and this has been assisted by psilocybin's journey. So she does not receive that, and she doesn't receive the behaviors that I had created to keep myself safe. So the magic is in the mushrooms, and if they are magic, they always tell me to remind myself that they also allow us to see the magic within ourselves. They are the most beautiful mirror. And through these journey processes, I have been able to gradually peel back layer by layer. And there are so many because of the complexity of the system and the conditioning that I came from. Gently peel back layer by layer, finding and revealing the real version of me, and falling in love with the story that I gifted myself in this lifetime. And seeing the beauty in it, and understanding that it is just one big love story, and not just forgiveness, but actually seeing it all as a gift. And the more I unwrap the gift, the more I get to receive. And it's taken me to a point now that I actually work with, when I say work with psilocybin, the mushrooms, and facilitate for others. I was called very much to step up and to do this with my partner, who is, like I said, from a science background. he went into it because in the military, there was only 40 people killed in combat and 2,000 suicided from the drugs that they were put on post the actual, being in combat. So we had to find another way, and because of my history with all the drugs and the talk therapy, that just doesn't work. It actually makes the wounds deeper. And being brought to assist people with this path, and the beautiful mycelium network does this wonderful thing where, obviously because of the legalities here in Australia, we only get bought the people who are really ready and really for this process. And it's not for everybody, I totally understand that. But I have done other psychedelics. I've done Bufo and also peyote and San Pedro, who all have beautiful places in our existence with wonderful messages. But the mushrooms are so clear. We have them grown with special frequencies and with love, and the intent behind the process and the family that it has begun to reunite and bring back into community. People who have the worst traumas that you could even, capital T's, come in and in 4 hours change their life. It is 4 hours of therapy, 6 hours of therapy in a lifetime. You can't get to some of those points of awareness and points that need to be healed that the subconscious has so tightly hidden away to protect us in a normal state, in a normal day-to-day life. This logical mind we have is just too busy trying to distract us from the need to feel and to heal. So I'm looking at the time, and I'll bring this to a close. So I have my life. I would not be here, and I cry with celebration if it hadn't been for finding these beautiful plant spirits and committing and devoting, not committing, my life to this work, no matter really what may be around in the legality side of it. I feel divinely protected with what we do. And to see, like I said, the incredible results from people who have just completely blasted through big traumas, little traumas, all kinds of experiences, to see and have clarity and an awakening on who they really are and the power within. Is about giving people back their power, not taking it from them with drugs or talking them around in circles. And I have now been called very clearly to the shamanic path of this, and that is how we integrate the therapy we do. Is we use the science and the knowledge and the history along with a safe setting that is more intuitively created with the shamanic rituals, which the mushrooms have all taught me. And yes, they are teachers, and you just have to listen. So that is the basis of my psychedelic story, but it's ever evolving as the journey always will continue. And I really recommend to anybody out there who has struggles and challenges to maybe do their own research and see if it aligns to them. And the funny thing is if it's for them, the mushrooms have this fairy tale ability of stalking you and just reappearing over and over again in your consciousness and in your physical reality. And that's how you just know that maybe this is something, a path that you would like to journey down. So yes, I have so much gratitude. Thank you very much for listening to my story, and blessings to you all.
I love that. Okay, two things that stood out to me there was when she said the magic mushrooms let you see the magic in you.
Mm-hmm.
Bam!
Everything she
I'm
said.
gonna
It
use
was all
that.
we
That's
talked about today. Almost
beautiful.
every single thing, right?
Right.
Right on. Spot on with everything, It's
She's
amazing
right.
how these work.
Yeah.
It's
It's
amazing.
amazing how they work. They are master plants. And
Mhm,
she is correct. And it's not just the mushrooms, but when any of these medicines start calling you,
mhm.
they are relentless and you will see them everywhere. And that's how you know it's time because it's just everywhere. How did she say it? They stalk you.
They do.
I
Sometimes
love
cannabis stalks me.
sometimes you think you're taking a vitamin and you're taking psilocybin.
Yes.
You want to tell
Let's
that
have
one?
that not today. It's for another day.
Well,
Great
we
show
love
today,
this.
though. Thank you.
Great show. If you want to tell your psychedelic story, we would love to hear it. Please go to YouTube, subscribe. You can go
We
to
need
Medicine with the
300.
Metals.
We need 240 more subscribers
To what?
till we get
The
1,000.
magic number.
Magic number.
Yeah.
So
And then you
let's
can scroll
subscribe to our
down there.
channel. We have a lot of views, but let's subscribe. We need some subscribers.
We do.
We get 1,000. Let's do it. We should do a promotion.
Well, yeah, let's think about that.
The 1,000 subscriber gets something. How about a date with Brian?
Yeah,
We're bringing Brian on for a
I'll
show
work
with
it.
Okay.
Stephen Twig.
I'll work it.
I'll work it.
I'll show him my WAP or whatever the kids say these days.
The Whopper. All right, I think it's time to go. Ciao, ciao.
Thank you.